The minimum wage debate is heating up in Santa Fe as we close in on the halfway point of this year's 60-day session. A committee recently advanced House Bill 31, which would bump the state's minimum wage to $10 next July. It would then go up even higher at some point in the future. The state hasn't increased the statewide minimum wage since 2009, Sophie, and HB 31 is just one of, I'll mention the other two that are out there. But it seems to have become a focus of attention for the restaurant industry specifically. Let's kind of hone in on that.
So the restaurant industry has always been a force, a vocal force against increases in the minimum wage. That's sort of, it's part of their deal. It's part of what they're constituted to do, the Restaurant Association. What's interesting to me is that an increase in the minimum wage has become incredibly popular in New Mexico, across the country. Right. It's one of those issues that's pretty non-controversial at this point, except that it doesn't seem to get done. Right. But amongst the general population, people seem to think that that's a pretty good idea. The Restaurant Association, brings this new wrinkle, which is that they don't like the idea of increasing. Or I should say, basically eliminating an exemption for tip servers. So tip servers make quite a bit less, but then the restaurants are required to get them up to minimum wage through tips. I just described that very loosely. I hope everybody knows what I'm talking about.
We'll cover you, no worries.
But essentially, with the bill that's moving forward right now, what it would do is that it would say all restaurant workers also need to make this minimum wage as $10, $12, and then indexed for inflation. And the restaurant owners have said that doesn't give us the flexibility we need. That doesn't reflect the reality in our businesses. It remains to be seen. My suspicion is that elimination of that exemption is going to go forward in the House, although there is some pushback on that. It remains to be seen whether it can make it through the Senate, though, and that's, I think, the area where there may be some more difficulty. And certainly, House leadership has expressed that they think it's going to be a problem in the Senate.
That's right. But they are, Mary, going for the gusto on Sophie's point.
Definitely.
And waiting to see it peeled back a little bit on the Senate side and maybe come to some kind of thing there. But that point about $10 an hour for tipped folks, getting the same as everybody else, again, staying on the restaurant deal, I can understand where restaurant owners are coming from. That's not a small, going from $2.13 to $10 an hour. It's a major difference.
That's 5 times as much, because they're paying $2.13 now. Of course, they do, if you don't make the minimum wage in tips, then the restaurant will pay up to $7.50, and so I get that. But still, it's a huge jump.
That's right.
But what's good about the bill is that it's going to be a gradual thing, $10, $11, $12, and then cost of living. Right. So businesses and restaurateurs at least will have some kind of breathing room to try to figure it out. But some of the restaurant owners are saying, well, you know what, we're just going to go to a self-serve model.
That's right.
We may have to close, we may have to lay off people, but Governor Lujan Grisham is going, talk to the hand. I have not seen that data.
They seem to say that every time, and then it doesn't quite happen that way.
But we'll see. But here's kind of then there's the other one. I hope I'm not jumping the gun. But then there's this proposed $15 minimum wage, which there's a lot of, saying, hey, $15 should be the living wage, because that purportedly can support a family of 4. And the pushback on that is, look, minimum wage jobs, for folks that work at, McDonald's, or no offense to McDonald's folks, but just that do that, that's a starting salary. That's a starting salary, and you're not meant to earn a living wage on a starting salary. But what about the people that started out working at McDonald's getting $7.50 an hour and have now gone up to $15 an hour? They have worked to get to $15 an hour. What's that going to say to them?
That's right.
And are we going to have to then raise their rates? And if we do, that's probably going to be more like a 25% increase. Right. And what does that say to, hey, bring your business here? That could be harmful to our economy.
It's an interesting wrinkle. I'm glad you brought that into this discussion, because it's not all places are the same.
Exactly.
And not all,
exactly. We're not, I live in a small town in Socorro. $15 would be a great living there. It would be a good wage.
That's right.
But we're not, you know, we don't have a Geronimo's restaurant in Socorro.
That's right.
You know,
That's
we've got small mom and pop restaurants that are great food, but they're not going to be able to afford that.
That's right.
You
That's
know,
right.
so.
Interesting points there. Yeah. Sophie mentioned, Michael, we've already got Cruces, Santa Fe, Albuquerque that's got their own minimum wage deal going, and this wouldn't affect those. Those would still be in place if this one passes out of our legislature. But do we know enough about the ramifications of increases in the minimum wage here to have a firm feel for this statewide? Are we there yet in your view?
Well, I think you referenced the fact that, and it's been referenced that there's been discussion of a study.
Right.
I guess what I would be looking at is what have. It's unfortunate. I guess we don't have one.
Right.
And it's like we've been kicking this ball down the road for what 10 years or so.
Yeah.
Why hasn't somebody commissioned that study? So I guess then the second thing I'd look at would be what has been other states who are comparable to New Mexico, and have they in fact done any research and done any studies, and what are the findings that might have.
That's an interesting point there, because 7 other states, or maybe it's possibly 8, have gone to the higher minimum wage for tip folks as well. Right. I've not personally seen a lot of pushback about it from those states, but I haven't looked everywhere, so I'm not quite sure if I have it down.
And I guess the other thing for me is just working poor. When people are working, out there working, and they're not making enough to provide for themselves and their families, that also is a real concern, and I think needs to be factored in all of this.
Exactly.
Exactly right. The governor, you know, she is taking a bit of a conservative approach here, but she, as Mary mentioned, she did say, which I find fascinating, that she hadn't been convinced yet by those who are opposed to this. I've not really heard a governor come out in the middle of a legislative negotiation and say, well, I'm not quite there yet. Well, you're not there because you're not there yet. Wait till it gets to your desk, you know. But what do you make of the approach? She wants to stir the pot on this, clearly. Oh, is it the right way to go?
She's not afraid to stir the pot.
There's a whole bunch there are a bunch of different ways you could look at it. You know, it could be a distraction, you know, because she has something else. You know, whenever you're in a negotiation, if something's going well on this end and you don't want to have it mess with it, you kind of stir a pot on the other end. But you know, the governor was pretty straightforward about saying that she wants to see a $10 an hour minimum wage, and I think that she's right.
Right.
You know, I've often just because of my work as a small business owner, will take this side of small business and say, oh, you know, you can't really control them. But you know what? There are a lot of businesses in general, small and large, who have been taking advantage of low-wage workers under the name of saying, you know what, we have to be profitable.
That's right.
Well, you know what? That's not a problem with it's a problem with your business model, and it's a problem with the integrity of running a business. And so I think that in this particular case, you know, having government mandate and increase that minimum wage is great. Now, they're not saying you have to mandate the maximum. So, you know, I think to Mary's point of what she was saying earlier about, you know, how do businesses handle somebody who's already at $15 an hour?
Right.
Well, that's up to the business, because there are a lot of other areas that will impact that wage. You have healthcare benefits. You have cost of living.
That's right.
You have, you know, dental, vision. You know, how does all that factor into it as well? And sooner or later, you're going to be beyond that $15 wage. You know, $15 wage. The other thing I want to be able to say too is that when you take a look at the surrounding states. And I think one of the pre-reads that we had identified that Arizona and Utah had higher minimum wages than we do here in New Mexico. Now, I think that while we have seen you know, their population and their revenues increase substantially, I don't think that's because of the minimum wage. I think it's minimum wage is one part of a larger economic development strategy.
That's right.
And so Alicia Keys and, you know, everybody else with the Economic Development Department take note, and I know that they have been. It's just one aspect. It is not the aspect. And how we treat business, I think, will determine how we succeed in
That's right. By the way, just a point of fact, that was House Bill 46 Mary was referencing earlier. We also have Senate Bill 437 out there. Got about 30 seconds or less on this. So the one thing that seems the most in trouble is the lower minimum wage for teenagers. I see a lot of angst on that online about that.
So
is that going to stick? It's something weird about that.
Here's the thing. We tell ourselves that all these minimum wage jobs are filled by teenagers. But we know millennials and Gen Z don't work as teenagers. They don't work as much as Gen X did, et cetera. So, and we also know that a phenomenal percentage of the people who are working low income, or working minimum wage jobs are supporting families. They are further along in their lives. They're not teenagers.
That's right.
And so when we use teenagers as the excuse to keep income low, here's what I think. At this point, a teenager who is working and who is doing the same job as a non-teenager deserves the same money.
Exactly.
They do. We don't know what they're paying for. We don't know if they're helping to support their families. We don't know. But we do know it's a small part of that pool.
Good way to finish that discussion. When we come back to the line, we'll mark the passage of 10 years since a mass grave was discovered on Albuquerque's west side. Plus, still to come this week, more on the environment and new threats to some of New Mexico's most unique water supplies.